So wood ducks are in the show Parks and Recreation, which is about a government operation. In the intro, there's a big wood duck mural on their office.
Oh, really?
Awesome.
Yeah, I
I've
always
never
love that.
watched
That
that
there's like,
show.
oh, it's
Funny.
it's it's pretty funny. I always enjoyed it.
I wonder who
It kind of just
painted
mocks
it.
like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, who
I
did
googled it.
that?
I found the picture. I'll post it or something, but it's really cool. But I feel like that's the most famous wood duck I can think of.
I mean, this bird is just one of the more beautiful birds in North America,
Yes.
and it's I'm surprised how much it flies under the radar, and some of that's related to its biology, kind of. But at the same time, I mean, when you see one, oftentimes you can actually see them pretty well in
Yeah.
various places, and oh my God, are they stunning? They're just an incredible bird, and then their biology is really awesome too.
John, what
You know,
did
I,
you mean when you say they fly under the radar, possibly due to their biology?
So, when I think of ducks, I think of mallards and things that are sitting out on ponds. And this is partly, growing up in Arizona, you go and to the sewage treatment plant to check out what ducks are coming through, and they're out in the open water and things. And wood ducks are literally, the name's perfect. They're ducks that inhabit woods for the most part. And so I think a lot of it is that, they're in flooded forest and places that can sometimes be hard to get to. So I think people don't overlook them because they can't get to the places where they are a lot of times.
Okay. Very cool.
And we see a ton of wood ducks where we live, and more than I've ever seen in my life. And I think that's kind of a reflection of where we live. Near like the Skokie lagoons, and there's all these little kind of flooded marshes and the forest preserves near where we live. And a part of me, was thinking, I know that they've kind of made a comeback too. So is that part of the reason why we're seeing more? Like growing up, I don't remember ever seeing them, but I think a lot of it too is just kind of the area that we live is really, I don't know, we're in their habitat. It's like all of these very wooded areas that are. It's almost like, I don't know, like the Skokie lagoons, these little wooded areas that have just enough water to sustain kind of a little area that they can live in.
This
Yeah.
gets
Yeah,
to
and I
why
and
I
I think
love Chicago so much because of
Mm.
the park district. People don't know if you haven't been to Chicago, you need to come because your preconceived ideas about Chicago are probably not true. This city is beautiful, first off. Second off, the lake is amazing. But the city has and the county have invested a lot in forest preserves. There are a lot of forest preserves. And I think that kind of the returning of some of these areas to more natural areas, whether with water and bigger trees, has made more habitat for wood ducks to be around, so that you can see them in semi-urban environments more than you probably would have before. So
and it's one of those birds where they figured out that, I mean, historically, the idea is that they nested mostly in pileated woodpecker holes because they're a big enough bird that a smaller woodpecker wouldn't build a big enough hole for them to nest in. So they nest in trees, and that's another aspect of their biology that's really interesting. There are other ducks that do that, but they're the only one uh, throughout that has as big a range across the United States, the continental United States, um, and so, yeah, I think they've come back into these habitats in part because they don't get hunted in these areas, and if there are nest boxes, they can use them, and so they've really established around humans pretty effectively.
Mhm.
And we've seen so many videos of those, like when they nest in trees and all the chicks that jump out and everything. And I feel like that was on like a Planet Earth episode back in like, 15 years ago or whatever. And they captured it with high speed cameras and it was in slow motion. And I feel like that was a moment for the wood duck. I feel like
Yeah.
everybody saw that and was like, oh my gosh. And you'd see them. And I read that they can jump like 50 feet. They fall 50 feet down to the ground and just bounce and then walk away from it.
I think I read the record. It was 89 meters,
Oh
which
my
which is
gosh.
just like what? where was
That's
that? And who, like the tree must have been on a cliff or something. And
Oh
oh
my
my gosh.
gosh.
Wait, how many feet, Shannon, Canadian Shannon, how many feet would that be?
Multiply by a little bit more than 3.
yeah,
Oh,
so yeah,
wow.
So
so we're
my gosh.
talking,
270 to 300 feet.
yeah, 200, yeah.
That
Was
is
it like a
insane.
redwood?
I
So
know.
there are a couple things like about that. So there's that height that clearly the birds, the chicks are actually kind of I think they're kind of perfectly designed in the sense that they don't weigh enough to really pick up pick up speed on the way down all that much. And I mean, those videos are absolutely show it so well. They just basically, the female's down below and she makes some calls, and the male's not even there. The male doesn't even help with any of this, and they know to jump out. And
Yeah.
the other thing I was going to point out about this too, which has some implications for kind of the thing we've been talking about with the design of the forest preserves and stuff, is I was reading that on average, in various places, they have to walk then from jumping out of the tree upwards of 2 kilometers to get to water.
Wow.
And if you think about doing that in an urban area,
Oh,
you're,
Oh yeah.
but, but they must figure it out. And,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, they walk better on land than a lot of ducks do.
okay.
Oh.
So we were reading that or I guess we watched a video and they said they're perching ducks rather than dabblers.
But they do
And we were
dabble.
wondering,
When they're
they
on the
do
water,
dabble.
they do
Yeah, they're not
dabble.
divers. Yeah. But are
So the
there other
dabbling means
perching
that
ducks?
you just kind of pick things off the top of the water like that. There are other perching ducks, yeah.
So what are those?
well, the only other member of their genus is this other incredibly ornate duck called mandarin duck, which
Oh,
is
awesome.
Okay.
which is found in the old world, and then they're related to a couple of other genera of ducks which tend to nest in trees, and so there are other species that do that.
Okay.
So the genus name is Aix. Is that how you say it, John? Aix? Aix?
I would never correct anybody. It's AIX is all
Yeah.
it is, and
Which means water in
Aix.
French, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so and I love this part. The species name is Sponsa, Sponsa, which means bride or bride to be. So
Oh.
Oh.
how pretty it is, and I think
Oh.
that's the connotation, is that it's all dressed up,
Yes. I love that.
ready for the wedding.
That's adorable. That's so cute.
There you go, Amanda. That's your favorite duck.
It is my favorite duck. It's like one of my favorite birds. They're so cute. Yeah.
I mean, I've had a great time going to this place I go birding all the time, Memorial Park Cemetery, up in Skokie, and it's got a couple of ponds on it. And I've watched females show up with a brood of nine ducklings, and raise all those ducklings in one of these open ponds to fledging. And it takes about 2 months or so. And my first thought is, when you see things like that, is that's a lot of coyote food. And yet, I all 9 in this one brood were there by the time they were getting ready they could fly.
Oh, wow. Good
And
mom.
and
There's
the
this
lagoons
forest-
you've seen them at the lagoons, right? With the big the groups
Yeah.
of chicks
Yeah.
swimming around.
Yeah.
You're right.
It's just
Yeah, there's this other forest preserve that we go to that's in Highland Park that's a little further west. But we always go back, and there's just this tiny little pond back there, and you take this trail, and we went there, and it kind of looked like there was nothing. And then the closer we looked, we saw, and they were all like really tucked away. But there was, I think, 2 or 3 different like moms, each with like
Families,
close to 10
yeah.
chicks.
Yeah.
So there were so many back there, and they were really tucked away. But it's their color when they're young, and the females it was really camouflaged. It's like the males are so they're easily
Oh, yeah.
identifiable, but we had trouble even seeing the way that they were like hidden back there.
Yeah.
And I have a funny story too, just about that spot that we saw all of them. So it's the spot that Amanda and I love to go birding, and we didn't realize, or we suspected, but we realized this later. It backs up to Michael Jordan's house. So there's this forest preserve, yeah, and there's this big fence on the other side of this pond that we go to, and we always knew, like, I think Michael Jordan's house is in this area.
Yeah.
And Michael Jordan just sold his house in Highland Park like within the past 6 months. And we looked at all the Zillow postings or whatever, and there's the aerial view. And we looked at the aerial view and we're like, that's that pond that we always go to just on the other side of his fence. It was in the shot.
And and the description didn't say close to baby wood ducks.
No, it
yeah.
should have. Yeah.
See, this is we got to work on this because
Right. That's why he had so much trouble selling it. They didn't know about the wood ducks.
exactly. I would, yeah, I would love to have wood ducks
I know.
bringing young to my pond, and
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
After we moved here, and before my dad died, we went on this tour of all over the place. And if you drive up Sheridan Road, you'll drive past his house, and there's a big 23 on the metal gate that is off of his property. So, we did all kinds of weird things, really Chicago-y
That's
like
awesome.
things that related to sports. Before
That's
my
so
dad
cool.
It's
died.
super cool. Yeah, you're right. You can just drive right up to that
You
gate.
can, yeah.
Yeah.
you're still a long ways from the house.
Right.
I believe
right.
it. I believe it. Yeah.
And
Look
from
at
the wood
Zillow.
ducks, you have to go all the way around.
But see, those wood ducks are probably nesting on one side of the property and then walking all the way across to the other.
I know. You're right. You're right. They could have jumped from a tree into
Yep.
his property.
Get run over by a very expensive car.
So it looks to me, and some of the accounts talk about the fact that wood ducks declined and then came back after the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918. So the same things that we talked about with the feather thief also protected the overharvesting of wood ducks. I mean, if you're going to have something fancy, a wood duck feathers are pretty darn fancy. So, you never know. This is why everything's interconnected, right? You save one thing, you don't know all the other things that you're helping along the way.
And at the same time, I mean, wood ducks, as we've been talking about, I think are incredibly resilient in a lot of ways. And so I was stunned to learn that they're the second most hunted duck in North
Yeah.
America. Which just
10%, and even the most in the Northeast. The most
10% of
hunted.
the
And
birds that
10%
are
of the
hunted
catch,
are wood
yeah.
ducks.
That's
But across the
crazy.
U.S., it's 10% of the ducks
Wow.
that are harvested are wood ducks. I didn't know that either.
I think there's, if you did a heat map of that, the other thing about wood ducks is you only see like pairs, and sometimes early in the season there can be 3 or 4 birds together in places like Perkins Woods where I go in Evanston. And so that's not a bird I ever think of sort of being in numbers anywhere. And yet one of the things that in the winter is they get these winter areas where they're roosting in flooded forest where there can be up to 1,000 or so. And my guess is
my gosh.
that's places in central Arkansas and places like that are probably where a lot of that hunting happens.
I believe that. Yeah.
Do
Just a
people
huge
hunt them
concentration.
to eat them?
Well,
Or just as
so
a
there's the
trophy
other
bird,
thing.
or-
No idea how good.
Huh.
I mean, their diet, which is, they're eating kind of anything they can get at some level, but they eat a lot of things like acorns and things like that in your diet make you probably pretty good tasting.
Oh, I
So
believe
I'm
it.
guessing
Yeah.
I've never heard of anybody actually eating wood duck.
I
Well,
haven't
clearly
either.
a whole bunch of people are. Does your family hunt for wood duck, Amanda?
No, they hunt rough grouse and pheasant, and I belong to Ducks Unlimited, which because it's like they conserve habitat, but it's really a lot of hunters also belong to that, and I get their magazine, and it always has recipes, and I'll have to look and see if there's wood duck
Yeah.
recipes.
I mean,
yeah, I'm
duck-
curious too. Yeah.
Ducks Unlimited and those hunters have done more to save habitat for ducks than whatever they cost when it comes to harvesting things. You know, they're
Amen.
not harvesting themselves out of existence. They are making sure that there's enough habitat to responsibly harvest ducks. So,
Amen. Yeah. My family belongs to Pheasants Forever. They're the same. It's like all about habitat. And it's like those hunters, they put so much money into habitat conservation. So, yeah, totally support that.
so use the duck stamps, people.
Oh yeah.
God, when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was learn to paint well enough to have it get into a duck stamp competition.
right?
That would have been awesome.
I never knew they existed. Barely knew what a duck was. I'm not joking, actually. I mean, duck. Okay,
Well, that's
fine.
that's
Right.
definitely one of the more American things you can come up with is duck stamps.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I did not know anything about duck stamps.
And I was always confused by the fact that they really have no monetary value to speak of. I mean, I think they
It's just
actually
for
had something on
collectors.
them, but it wasn't like you were going to put them on a envelope and mail something.
Right.
It was
And
just,
use them. Yeah.
Right. Right.
I mean, the only thing I would have known about ducks was whatever Robert Bateman might have done any kind of art project on ducks. Have you heard of him?
Okay.
Robert
I'm not
Bateman?
I
familiar
have
with
not.
Robert Bateman.
No.
I think
Yeah,
he
you
probably
tell
entered a
us?
duck stamp contest at one point in time in his career. I don't know that for sure. He's a wildlife artist and
Oh, cool.
absolutely tremendous painter.
And he does a lot of ducks.
No,
don't know,
but I'm
but-
just, but so many
I have his
wildlife painters
books.
do ducks.
Oh, okay.
It's just like, why not? If you can win the competition.
Oh, right. Right.
I read that the wood ducks have slimmed, streamlined bodies to help them go through the forest. Do you believe that, John? Do you buy that?
I was fascinated by that from the perspective of what kind of data you'd want to have to kind of prove it. I mean, one thing I've certainly seen them fly through trees on a regular basis, and you would think that ducks flying through trees would be putting themselves in a lot of danger. And so you could imagine over evolutionary time that it's absolutely essential to have good eyesight and maneuverability that doesn't exist
They do have
in-
bigger eyes, right, than the average duck. Their eyes are bigger.
and they've also got a longer tail. That's actually one of the best ways to identify them from mallards, for instance, in flight is that they have this long tail.
And it's
I don't-
shaped differently too.
But I wonder if it helps make them a little more maneuverable, because one of the things that I've always been fascinated with by ducks is when you see the wing, the actual area of that wing is much less than what you would see on another bird of comparable size. So like a crow or something, they have these big, long, the wing area from the primaries is much bigger than what you see in a duck. I mean, they're designed kind of like a jet and they fly super fast, but what you lose in that is maneuverability. So the idea that you're flying through trees all the time, yeah, you can't afford to make
I think
mistakes.
they're like that because they have to fit into a woodpecker hole. There's no way you're going to be round and big if you're not going to excavate your own cavities, which they don't. You got to fit in cavities that exist in trees.
Well, I think that's
So-
certainly going to limit your upper size. Although I was curious about that because I feel like, so for instance, Memorial Park Cemetery, there are no pileated woodpecker holes around. And so while I think I can absolutely imagine that they will use pileated woodpecker holes whenever possible. I think the other thing they're getting sold short for is being able to find, broken off branches that have areas where they can kind of get inside and just build a nest and protect themselves. I was thinking that would be an interesting study for somebody to do is look in areas where there aren't pileated woodpeckers and there aren't nest boxes, and they're still finding places to build a nest.
That is really interesting, Jack, because like the areas RJ was describing, RJ, I don't think there's pileated woodpeckers in those around the Skokie lagoons necessarily.
Well, we saw one that one time with the Mary McDonald Woods,
You're right.
like out by so maybe they are, and
Maybe
I
there
don't
are.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, but I would say there aren't enough to actually build enough holes for all. And this is
I agree.
There's actually a whole another aspect of this, which is pileatids are moving into the Chicago area, and I think one of the reasons they are is because probably almost all that area was logged at some point, and now you're just getting the trees to be old enough and big enough that they can actually justify coming in and constructing nest holes in places like Ryerson and some of these other areas where they're nesting. But
That's awesome.
But wood ducks, they've adapted pretty well to urban, semi-urban areas where there's quiet water and they can find food. And
So they line their nests with down feathers from their bodies, from their breasts, which I think is really sweet. So if you like your down quilts, you want to preserve birds, or you're not getting your down quilts.
So one of the things I've never understood about that is duck plumages are some of the most immaculate. You won't it's very unusual to see a duck that's like missing feathers someplace.
Yeah.
Well, they
And
carefully
so
don't pick the outside ones, and then they
Right.
must preen it so that they cover up whatever they're plucking out. And apparently the pile of down gets thicker and thicker and thicker as they kind of develop the nest, which I also think is cute. I couldn't survive without my down quilt, and that includes in August.
Did I see that sometimes females will share a nest too? I read somewhere that they.
It sounds like one of the things that's happened is with the advent of nest boxes in particular, there's a whole bunch of the density is increased in some areas, and when density gets really high, a lot of things happen. So I think you're talking about like what they call egg dumping, where females will lay in other females' nests.
Oh, okay.
And
Interesting.
It's a strategy
So they're all of a sudden responsible for all these other eggs that are in their nest. It's not like they're raising them together with two. Oh, okay.
Oh.
And
That's
it sounds
interesting.
like actually one of the things that happens is the female that's dumping will come in while the other female is laying, and in those situations, the laying female tends to lay fewer total eggs than she would in a clutch that wasn't dumped on. So in other words, it's
wow.
almost like she's counting, and her physiology kind of says, yeah, I better not go
Wait.
beyond
More
13.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
So-
Wait, this is blowing my mind.
I know.
Where do the other ones go? So, wait. So when they're laying eggs, there's like it's not like there's a set amount. Like there's 9 eggs inside of their belly. It's like they're producing like one after another after another.
Usually,
this is
that's what
a
happens.
really
That's
interesting
why
question.
Egg laying is a process. It's not like giving birth in the sense the way a human. If you had triplets, they're all going to come out within a few minutes of each other. That's not what happens. It takes sometimes several days, many days, before all the eggs are laid. And the female doesn't incubate them until she incubates all of them. So then they come out faster than they might have been laid. So they come out of their, you see what I mean? Because that stops or slows down the development inside of the egg when the female bird's warmth is not there to kind of speed the process up. So, but they've got to get all of the resources to make an eggshell And because these things are precocial, you can have 16 of them. They come out of the nest fully running around, which,
Yeah,
there's
so
no,
there's no penalty in a sense if the clutch doesn't get eaten by a raccoon or something.
I mean, there's a
That if
penalty to the
everything,
female, though, of laying that many eggs because of the resources that she has to take out of her own body to do that. You're gonna worry about a female's bone densities and things like that because the calcium
we
for the
need,
eggshell comes from somewhere.
and
Mm.
of course, chickens are laying indeterminately. They just keep laying eggs.
Oh,
And
right.
in the natural world, I can think of at least one example. We could have Mary Hennon on to talk about peregrine falcons, where it looks like a female in one of the nest sites in Indiana may have laid 40 eggs in one
Oh
season.
my
And
gosh.
and you're just so weird things can happen like that. But
Wait.
it's just
Oh, sorry, John. Go ahead.
no.
Oh, I was to say I'm like so confused. So I'm trying to wrap my head around like going back, and I'm totally ignorant of how this works. Going back to what you said originally, John, is it a matter of like when a hen, when another hen dumps on the primary hen whose nest this is, does that primary hen like leave eggs inside her, or does she
No,
not?
Good question.
She
No,
delivers
that's
them
a
and she
really good
doesn't tend
question.
to them.
Yeah,
she
that's a real
doesn't
good
make
question.
more, right? So, I mean, there's a choice, I suppose, but I mean, the body can shut that part down, right? So if you see that there's
Okay.
enough, then there must be visual cues that say, okay, no more, not producing any more eggs. So females can store sperm. So it's not like they have to have sex every time that they're going to produce an egg. So
And
Oh
they
I
can
think
wow.
they can
with
store
ducks
sperm
in
and then fertilize and fertilize an ovum and produce an egg. Yeah,
Wow.
really, it's true.
and with
And
ducks in
sometimes,
particular, you've got this situation where the male isn't involved in anything. So my guess is in some of those cases, the female hasn't found a nest site, but she's ready to lay. And what does she do? Well, if she finds another female that's got a box that's already started, she'll try to get in and drop an egg.
Oh
Hmm.
wow. That's
apparently
do
the
they
males don't help, but they do hang around while the female does the choosing of the nest site. The males hang around, but they don't help after that. They're not helping find it. They're not building it. They're not putting their own feathers in it or anything like that. But behaviorally, they kind of hang around while the female is choosing. Maybe that is some form of mate guarding. Uh,
Mm.
too, is that right then the male sperm is what is being used to fertilize internally inside the female to fertilize those eggs. So preventing another male from being part of it could be part of what happens.
okay.
I don't know.
That makes sense. So the
But that's
expression of dumping, is that what like cowbirds do? Is that or is
Yes.
that a different expression?
so no, because there's I would say it's different, and the reason it's different is because cowbirds are basically have evolved to become obligate,
Okay.
where that they literally are, and they're laying in other birds' nests, whereas I guess birds another whole nester is hooded merganser, and hooded merganser females will lay in wood duck nests in certain areas. But again, my guess is you've got a female that's ready to lay and hasn't found a nest hole or a site that she can use to build, and so or use to lay, and so she's going to look around for a place to drop it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
cool.
you want to hear some really silly facts about
Yes.
wood ducks?
Yes.
So, well, they hybridize in captivity extensively with their congeners, so with the mandarin duck. Like,
Oh, awesome.
Oh,
but they've also, humans are so bizarre. They have also interbred wood ducks with more than 20 other duck species successfully.
whoa.
None of the offspring are fertile, it seems, but they will
Oh.
certainly create interspecies and sometimes intergeneric, actually almost always
Wow.
intergeneric eggs.
Right.
What's that bizarre?
Intergeneric mean?
Between two different
for
genera of
instance,
birds.
Oh,
So
so
it's-
okay.
they'll hybridize with mallards, and mallards
Yeah.
are in the genus Anis, and so they're sort of far apart on the evolutionary tree. I mean, we should our give a shout out to our major professor at Louisiana State University, Bob Zink, who always used to talk about hybridization as basically just essentially using the word homoplasy, meaning that it's a trait that just implies that you have a common origin with whatever you're hybridizing with.
Which
At the
doesn't
same
mean
time,
immediate
though,
common origin.
right, these things are actually oftentimes these hybrids are infertile,
Okay.
and so they're
So-
not able to.
But
to
there are pictures of them and they are super bizarre looking. So you can,
Oh,
Oh,
there are
cool.
hundreds of pictures of wood duck cross with whatever it is. And there's a lot of really bizarre. I mean, this sounds weird, but this is one of the ways where you kind of try to figure out how colors get made or how patterns get made as you make these hybrids, and then you see what's differently expressed in the developing embryos or in the feathers to figure out what it means, how you get certain colors or patterns. But it is
wait. So Shannon, would that happen? Let's say the mallard wood duck hybridization, that doesn't happen in nature. That's just like under human
I don't know about that one.
interference.
I don't think those things are all that common, but it could be. I suppose I don't know the answer to that.
There was a bird that showed up for something like, I think it was the same individual for something like 7 or 8 years in a row along the Chicago River in Evanston. That was a hybrid between a hooded merganser and a common goldeneye.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
And it basically had the head of the goldeneye shaped like a hooded merganser.
What the
oh.
heck?
And then
Oh
and,
my
it's,
gosh.
and the interesting thing there is now you're talking about bills that are really different. You know, one of them is merganser bills are designed for catching fish, whereas the goldeneye bills are designed for going down and grabbing shellfish and things. And yet this thing was clearly surviving. I don't know. I mean, these ducks are, one of the things about ducks too is again, I think basically all ducks have no long-term pair bonds.
Mm.
And so they pair up in the fall and breed, but then and females will go back and breed in the same holes in the case of wood ducks, with a pretty high percentage of them doing that. But I don't think they're mating with the same males year after year. I don't think
Okay.
there's any evidence of that.
Wow.
So, John, that bird you were just talking about, the goldeneye hooded merganser, we think that was natural. It wasn't like
That
a
was a
lab leak
natural,
or something.
yeah.
Wow.
There was no, yeah.
That's
And again, you know, that's how does that happen? It's a good question. I mean, it's obviously a lot of the
Well-
pairing in ducks happens in the fall.
And
And
there's a
so-
lot of rape that happens in ducks. I mean, this is one of the first things you do when you teach the field part of ornithology, because you go and look at ducks on the pond because they're big, they're pretty easy to see, so you can teach people how to look for field marks,
Well,
how to look
mallards.
at behavior. Yeah, but not just mallards. There are other ducks. And
like duck
and there's-
rapists.
Yes.
Okay.
They're just programmed to have sex at certain times of the year, and they don't care what it's with. So, and there's all kinds of violence, and so there you are trying to teach people about looking at birds. Like, oh yeah, yeah, that is not consensual. No,
Oh no.
Wait,
and
are
yes,
ducks
it is
the biggest
speeding it up.
offenders that way? Yes, it is beating it up. I know you've said they can kill their.
Yeah, the female.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, ducks
Are
are.
ducks the worst about that? Like, are other birds doing that?
They do it out in the open, maybe.
I'm sure in
Okay.
the literature there are other examples, but absolutely ducks are the place where it's best known.
Okay. And it's not wood ducks, it's like mallards, right?
Well, see, this is the
It's
thing.
not my
I mean,
sweet wood ducks,
I
right?
well, I actually so this was something that I was surprised by. Is I was it made me think about it. Here, I think wood ducks have already, they're not even here when they're pairing up. So they've migrated south to their wintering grounds in the fall, and I think that's where a lot of that's happening. So you'd have to be in a whole different part of the country to actually watch wood ducks pairing up,
Okay.
and yeah,
So we
I don't
don't
know.
know. We don't
Well,
know. Okay. Oh.
I think there's less information than you might think, and again, I think it's because they're often the flooded forests and not like the mallards where you see two male mallards chasing a female around, in the spring here in Chicago.
In the open, yes. Okay. Oh, I'm going to choose to believe the wood ducks don't do that.
Okay. You do that, Amanda.
Hence they warned the big wall mural at Parks and Recreation.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. They
You
wouldn't
know-
have put.
You feel free to burst your bubble of innocence as we go along. You can always count on me for that.
Yes.
Even though
Wait,
I'm
do
the
the
one
wood
who
duck-
always has to look things up in the Urban Dictionary because I have no idea what people are saying about. But it's different when it comes to birds. Other
Do the
bizarre
wood ducks have
facts.
a curly fry like the mallards? That's RJ's favorite subject.
I knew this was going to come up.
Did you?
Well, that is the way of rape. Having a curly penis is important.
Okay. Do the
And
wood ducks have that?
one?
I don't know. How could I not have looked that up?
I'm going to
Crazy.
choose to believe they don't.
Yes, Amanda. Everything is perfect about them in
Yes.
your mind.
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting that I feel like there's a gap in knowledge related to that.
Wow. That's so interesting. I never thought about them like mating in remote areas where you wouldn't know as much. Yeah. Because you're right. You see mallards all the time doing stuff, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Wood ducks, apparently, if AI is correct, but I'm not so sure.
They have a curly fry.
Wait,
I don't know if
is
it's
the AI
curly.
giving you pictures?
Oh, I don't. I think that's. Oh, the wood duck penis is a retractable organ stored inside the cloaca when not in use.
Yeah, that just makes
Doesn't
it a
sound
bird.
curly. Yeah. Doesn't
No,
sound
not all
curly to
birds
me.
have penises.
That's true.
Well, for the sake of, I'm feeling uncomfortable about this curly fry penis talk. Do you guys
You
want to get into our
started it.
mailbag question?
Yeah, yeah.
Amanda did.
It
It was Amanda.
I think on that note, we should go to the
They do
mailbag.
fly at 51 kilometers an hour on their migration,
Oh,
right? As we switch the
wow.
fun facts away from things that make us all blush.
And they're
amazing.
retracted at that point.
Yeah,
John,
it's inside.
We had
For
pivoted.
aerodynamic reasons.
We had pivoted, and I didn't. They did not do this when I was growing up, but I didn't know that they've expanded pretty dramatically into British Columbia, including smack dab over the small town I grew up in.
Cool.
and including a recent record on the northern tip of Vancouver Island. So if you go off the coast of British Columbia, there's a pretty big island. Victoria's on that. It's called Vancouver Island, and they've gotten all the way up there with nesting. And mostly people think it's due to nest box. nest boxes.
Oh.
So that there's thousands and thousands of them deployed all over British Columbia, and apparently that's why they're actually nesting pretty successfully now.
Great.
I was going to actually ask you guys. You told us that you saw some baby barred owls,
Yes.
Yeah.
and were they using a nest box? Do you think, or does
Oh,
I
that's a
don't
good
think so.
question. Yeah, not
We
that we
didn't
could
we didn't
tell.
see one in the area, and they
okay?
were yeah, yeah. They were far up in the trees. Each was in like their own tree, and so Amanda spotted the mom first, and we walked up and were looking at it with binoculars, and then for like 10 minutes didn't realize that there was a second one or even a third one, and then all of a sudden looked up and there was one like right above us that we
Yes.
could see. And so we sat and watched that for 10 minutes, and then I was like, I think there's another one over there.
You know, that's
And so, yeah, the chicks were, it was, one of them was on a really narrow branch and was kind of like walking, like trying to work its way closer to the tree. And we watched it over the course of like 20 minutes, just kind of like slowly work its way down this branch. And it would like kind of flap its wings a little bit, but it looked like a little like fluff ball. It
Yep.
was definitely like pretty young.
Yeah.
It was super cool.
So
yeah,
exciting.
you
Yeah.
start realizing that just like the wood ducks jumping out of the box is something. These barred owls have to leave the nest and then learn to hold on to things, and
Yeah. That's what we were wondering. Like, I'm assuming that they flew to those two different spots, right? How else would they have gotten there? Because they were in separate, totally separate trees from each other and from their mom.
so we were just talking about that based on a North Evanston North Shore bird chat conversation about a great horned owl chick that showed up in somebody's yard, and I think again from an evolutionary standpoint, because that's something that's going to happen, those birds have pretty good capabilities of kind of climbing up things, and so I'll bet
Oh,
one of those
wow.
chicks actually went to the
Oh.
ground and then worked its way up.
Yeah,
That
you have
is
to practice, right? The first
crazy.
time you try to fly, you're not going to do it properly necessarily or ever. So
Oh.
they fall to
Right,
the
right.
ground. If you got to learn how to fly, you got to get back up in a tree to jump off and try it
Wow.
again. And so I don't know how far afield they actually go, but plenty of birds. That's why we always tell people to leave a bird alone if you see it, unless you see a very injured bird, to leave it alone because that's what mama birds are doing, right? They're usually watching. Um, and a lot of times they'll feed a bird that's fallen to the ground while the
Oh,
bird
okay.
is still learning
Oh.
how to figure out how to fly. It's an incredibly risky thing. I mean, can you imagine the bird is just standing on the branch thinking, I watched my parents do this. I think I'll try. It's like that's insane.
Yes.
Yeah.
So scary.
So circling back to wood ducks really quickly. I mean, I watched this brood of 9 get to the point where they were ready to leave, and they must have left. But you've basically been swimming around in this pond for the last 2 months, growing, and now you've got to fly like a wood duck. And I was just thinking, what the heck? And actually, here's another quick story, which is that I got a message from the woman that has Giselle Hazel down in the Falklands, and she was telling me that they had brought in a window-killed black-browed albatross fledgling,
Oh, wow.
Mm.
and if she would put it in the freezer for us. And I never thought about the idea that an albatross could actually hit a window.
Jeez.
But you also have to realize that these birds have to learn to fly, and they're definitely not going to be very good at it when they start out. And she said that actually is not an uncommon occurrence.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
An
So how
albatross.
do wood
Jeez.
ducks actually take that first flight, and then also once you get up, you got to come down.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Jeez.
Yeah. So the
So
place
when
I
they-
went to learn about all of this stuff about wood ducks being in British Columbia is the Atlas of Breeding Birds of British Columbia, which is one of the first things I worked on when I very, very, very first got interested in birds. I had this job at the museum in Victoria, part of the time I was preparing specimens and computerizing and cataloging the collection there, which for someone who has OCD, lining up all the beaks all perfectly in line is a very pleasing thing. But I also, they have a giant card catalog of breeding bird records, nest records, babies records. It was huge numbers of cards. And so what we were doing was summarizing when and where breeding was happening in North American birds using this giant card index. So I look back at that, and the same people who were doing it when, a million trillion years ago when I was there, are still some of the authors on these accounts.
That's
Just
awesome.
pretty fun.
Cool.
That is so cool.
And
We'll put a link to the.
those breeding bird atlases are in a lot of ways state by state things that are tied up with gathering data like Project Feeder Watch does, where they're just, it's a really valuable tool to monitor populations of things.
Yeah.
I mean, without these things, we
citizen
don't
science.
know the effect that warming habitats, warming climates are having on when birds can and can't breed, and when they can and can't migrate. What is it that determines that? Is it temperature? Is it day length? Is it some aspect of food availability? What is it? And if we don't have these records throughout time, we can't understand the relative contributions that these things might make to influencing how birds and when birds migrate.
I had one quick question about, was trying to picture, John, what you were saying about birds, like the barred owls possibly climbing up the tree. I guess one two-part question. Are they using their wings to do that in addition to their feet? And is that all birds, or if, like wood ducks, for example, are they doing the same thing if they have to get into a tree?
Yeah. So I think the answer to that is yes. Now, the crazy thing about wood ducks, right, is they're just trying to get back to the water once they fledge. And then they'll actually go to a tree when they're old enough to actually look for a site. So I think there's a whole bunch of ingrained behaviors there that are kind of fascinating too. But yeah, I think what happens is good wing exercise. If you're a barred owl and you've got to claw your way back up a tree, you probably get pretty good at flapping doing it. And so it's
wow.
that's I think that must be what happens.
Okay. It's not like they're tree hugging the tree. They're
No,
doing
they're
this.
balancing, I would imagine.
Okay.
But maybe they wedge themselves with, through the trunk with other branches and limbs that are on the tree. I've never seen a bird do that, so I don't know. And I never thought of
It's
looking
also-
at videos. There's probably videos, maybe. I don't know.
There probably are. It's also probably a significant source of mortality in the sense that, once you get on the ground, if you can't get up, something's going to come get you. And that's one thing I've always been fascinated by with Mary Hennon and the peregrine falcon work in Chicago is it's not uncommon at all for young peregrine falcons to take their first flight and end up on the ground. And what that must mean is by the time they do that, they're pretty close to being able to fly.
Yeah.
And so once they get on the ground, they must be able to figure it out. But again, they probably have to. I mean, getting off the ground is a lot different than dropping off a ledge where you've at least got a chance to open your wings and get to the next place. So no, I think there's a lot of stuff like that about young birds leaving nests that just is absolutely fascinating to me because of the various parameters that can come into play with respect to screwing up.
I wonder if
Yeah.
living in cities makes it a bit easier if they avoid a car and things like that, just because there aren't as many big predators there to pick off a peregrine falcon chick that needs to spend a little bit of time on the ground while it tries to figure out what to do. Do you think
Well, I
that?
think the funniest thing is there's so many people watching that Mary's phone immediately rings
Well,
because
that's true.
somebody's contacted, and so she can come scoop them up, and what she'll do is she'll
Yeah.
put them back up on the ledge. In that case,
Oh,
Oh,
and if she can, and if she can't, then they'll take them out to the rehab centers where they'll raise them up to where they can fly, and then they'll take them out and release them.
hmm.
That's awesome.
But
I have I have an owl question, and also our mailbag question is about owls too. So I think this will apply to what we're talking about and that. But as far as like, I'm in all these Facebook groups now for different bird watching and stuff, and it seems like there's a lot of like limitations on what you can share about owl location and things like that. What are some of the like rules for that? Because I took some
Yeah.
cool pictures yesterday, but I'm like, I don't want to post any of these if you're not supposed to, or are there rules and stuff for that? Or because I've seen people that are like, don't share, like someone posted a photo of a great horned owl somewhere in Chicago, and someone said, don't share this on here because I don't know, people are gonna rush to see it, and I don't know.
yeah, I mean, this is, I don't know. I'm probably not the best person to ask on this. I think that what I
Okay.
would do is if I saw an owl, I would not post a picture for a while and then
Hmm.
be willing to post it later. Um,
Okay.
I mean, it's important that those things get in public databases so that people can understand.
for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, that's
So,
the part of the problem for me. I mean,
Hmm.
people just worry that they'll get harassed, and in the birding world, there's definitely, you can point to situations where things do get harassed, and
Okay.
for sure.
at
Okay.
this,
It's
yeah.
So
tricky.
eBird, you want to log it in eBird, but maybe a
I mean,
photo, wait, or don't share the location of where the photo was,
it'd be
or
interesting to get some of the folks we know, like Matt Svitas, who's an editor for eBird, to talk about. I mean, they can shield some of those data,
Mm.
Hmm.
and this is something that happens across all aspects of biodiversity. So, for instance, iNaturalists will probably shield data from lots of different reptiles and amphibians, because if you do post the locality data, then people go out and collect them for the pet trade.
Mm.
And so
Oh, okay.
there's different reasons why things would be problematic. In the bird world, it's just felt like people go out and harass the owls, and so that's why there is at the age that you were looking at them.
Hmm.
I think at that point they're way far enough along that there's probably not much that would happen. But at the same time, if people are bothered by it, that's okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna read our mailbag question then, because this is kind of gets into that same territory. It was super cool. This is from Curtis, and Curtis said, "Firstly, I want to thank you all for the joy you bring me and my coworkers over at Disney's Animal Kingdom in Orlando, Florida. Our park has a great connection with the Field Museum in Chicago, so we naturally appreciate when John and Shannon share their experiences. All this to say, we recently noticed a nesting pair of great horned owls living on a pillar by our aviary and tiger habitats. I know you have briefly touched on them in the past, but we are looking for some name suggestions for our new owlet in the nest. Pictures attached, and we can, I guess, post the photos."
So
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 cool.
so I think the connection he's to the Field Museum he's referring to is the Tyrannosaurus Rex Zoo,
Oh.
because when the Field
Oh,
Museum bought that, they bought that in conjunction with Disney and McDonald's.
Oh,
And
wow.
oh,
one of
okay.
the things that happened down at Disney was a bunch of the material when they were uh, doing the work that was necessary to take Sue out of the matrix that it was in. A lot of the preparation was split between the Field Museum and Disney,
Wow.
and so I think that's what's
Oh,
going on.
So they
I
have a
was gonna,
model. They're the only place where there's a traveling zoo that goes around, but I think they're the only place that has another kind of life-size replica of Sue.
Wow.
oh,
Very
okay. I didn't
cool.
realize that.
and
Cool.
from my perspective, they should name them whatever they want, but
Oh
but
well, that's
we
no
could have a
fun.
whole
You are
episode on how.
you are
how
so
I feel
unfun,
about
John.
naming things.
Oh,
No, fair enough.
wait, are you not, you're not in the camp of naming stuff, John?
There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that because in part because I think people buy into it, and that's fine. I just think from a biological standpoint, that organism doesn't identify itself as having that name, so it's a completely artificial construct.
Yeah, well, you
And
can thank Curtis for 2 hours I spent trying to figure out what an interesting name of owls might be.
So you've got a suggestion,
This is a
Shannon?
whole rabbit hole for me, and then I debate with myself about what sounds good or not, or what approach you might take to naming. Oh God!
I'm trying
So
to.
yes, I
The,
have
the,
like
the,
a
the last time I
50,000.
did this, I was at Arkansas State University for a seminar, and they took me out to catch loggerhead shrikes because they have a long-term study on loggerhead shrikes. And when they take somebody out like that, they get to name them. And it was Valentine's Day, and I think we called it Big Love or something.
Aw.
Oh,
And it was one that somebody suggested, and I was just like, yeah, sure, let's call it Big Love.
okay.
This cracks me up.
So I have a suggestion for the owlet, and so I was looking at the pillar, and you'll see this in the picture, but it looks like something out of like Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is a Disney owns that, I know, and because like in owl pellets, there's bones, so I thought the name could be Indiana Bones.
Yes.
There we go. Perfect.
Oh,
Love it.
that's a good one.
Love it.
I like it.
Yes.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
So the one I found cutest
Did you come up
was
with Shannon?
Owliver.
Oh, cute.
I like that. I like that.
Oliver.
And then I
That's
got
so
then I went
cute.
way far because of my love of words. I had to look up what great horned owl means in other languages. So, Grand Duc d'Amérique is what it means in French. So you could call it Grand Duke, or
Aw.
Oh,
things like that.
I like that.
See, I'm fine with all these. I just
In Spanish,
it's not going to know it.
Pujo cornudo. That's no one's not as doesn't sound as good. And in Portuguese, it's coruja do mato.
See, I was going to suggest
Anyways.
horny.
I like horny.
John.
I'm sorry, it's Disney. I'm not, what am I thinking?
Yeah, Disney. Yeah, this isn't HBO.
Then I got really hokey because it's a baby, and I thought we could call it Hope or Luna or something like that,
Oh.
because babies to me they signify the kind of the hope of the whole world is in every baby, because they're so pure and they're so innocent and they're just so full of potential. They've never hurt
I like
anything
that.
or anybody, so that's why I like Hope.
Hope.
Now wait a
that's
minute.
really
That great
sweet.
horned owl is going to grow up to be a
I know,
absolutely
it
trained
has-
killer.
It has a short window of
assassin.
time before it starts picking off small mammals. That's true.
Yes.
It's been
But it's
it's been
still a
eating
baby.
small mammals its entire youth.
Fair, actually. Okay, well,
That's so
I
funny.
take Hope off the
Well, then
board then.
Indiana Bones, then.
There we go.
Bones.
Indiana Bones
there-
is it.
Is
Or
there
Owliver.
one or two, RJ?
I like
Is
Owliver
there-
too.
I like Owliver
I like-
too.
I like
Yeah.
Owliver.
I like
Yeah.
horny too. I gotta give horny
I
a
do
shout
not. I do not
Distant-
approve of
distant-
horny.
distant
I do
third.
not.
out. I totally thought John would be into naming it, and Shannon would have John's attitude of like, "That's lame."
Curtis
I
caught
like
me
that
at a
you
weak
guys-
moment.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's like that. Yes, awesome.
Well, Curtis, keep us up to speed on the
Yeah.
if there's a naming contest or anything.
On horny,
If
yeah.
horny wins,
And how they're doing.
Do not encourage John. Do not name that baby owl horny. That's not good. Then do you want people to be looking up words in the Urban Dictionary as they're standing by the sign that you put somewhere about the cute names you have for these baby owls? I don't think you do.
It's a parent-child moment. Like, Mom, what does
Exactly.
horny mean?
No, more like a child parent moment, because I'm always the one who has no idea what people are talking about. And I hate looking things. I make people who say things that I don't know what they are look up in the Urban Dictionary for me on their technology, because I'm not having those searches
Oh.
on mine.
Oh,
I
yeah.
do the same to RJ. I'm not gonna foul up my phone.
And we used to play these games with the high school interns sometimes, and I don't like, how do they know these things? How does a 15-year-old know? I don't know how they know. How do they know? And why don't I know? I don't know
It's
any
we
of
didn't
this
grow up
stuff.
with the internet.
The
It's
internet.
the internet. Yeah, we didn't grow up with the internet. Thank God.
Don't ask.
And then why are there names for some of these things? I mean, who makes these names?
Wait, what are you talking about, Shannon?
I can't say any
This
of
is
them.
no, we have a little bit of
This is a
think we
common
should-
thing.
Yeah, we're
because
about to lose the Disney crowd.
exactly.
in the Pritzker lab, people make jokes all the time at my expense, including our lab manager, Kevin Feldheim. He's constantly making jokes at my expense because I have no idea what he's talking about.
No, you should be
and then
proud
he
of
takes
that.
great delight in telling me what these things are, and I'm like, no way, that's not a thing. Kidding me?
Can you give us a PG
No.
example?
No, she can't.
No.
Nope.
I cannot.
Okay.
All right,
And I will
you can
not.
stop recording and
Yeah, there's no. You can ask teenagers who might listen what the kinds of things are, but I'm not telling that. And I have publicly embarrassed myself by not knowing what I said, because I didn't know it had alternative meanings.
My mind is running wild, imagining what you're talking about.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up before we get deplatformed for
yeah.
some inappropriate. Anyone want to close it out with a PG closeout?
I love wood ducks. Oh, that's PG.
and I think the Parks and Recreation mural sounds like something that we should go visit.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
I'll try to get a picture of it and we could post it.
There we go.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.